Madam Speaker, it's always a tempting goal to try and easily solve social inequality by throwing money at it. However, what we fundamentally see is that although economic equality exists in the status quo, the social inequality that minority groups who have been systematically in the past been oppressed towards is still systematically in the system, no matter how much money you throw at it. I think the very meaning of this resolution and the very words within the motion show that the oppression that we're talking about is not oppression that is simply that of having less money, having less of an ability, just as Speaker will allow, but is that of people who are systematically within the system less able to be considered equal by their peers. We believe that throwing money, that giving more, basically giving money or taking less money from certain groups does not make other groups more likely to A, cooperate with those of those peers, and B, to actually enhance the ability for people to actually consider one another equal. I'm going to have a lot of talk about money within my speech, because whenever they talked, or whenever they tried to rebut our entire case by saying that backlash is inspecific, what we brought to you is a specific mechanism by which money, within its value in society, actually characterizes the backlash that we're going to see from society. First, I'd like to talk about one point of rebuttal before I get into the substance of my case. Okay, so they talk about lifting out of the cycles of poverty by getting money, right? They say that we're going to give people money. For instance, they can start a business and be able to help their community out. I disagree with that for two reasons. First, mostly, they've already conceded this within their case, they're going to be helping people within a specific community. So insofar as they are helping, sure, some minorities who have been systematically depressed within inner city Detroit, they're still being exposed to social inequality throughout the entirety of the world. Yes, this individual may start a business. Yes, this individual may not have to ask the bank for a bank loan because they have more money because of their tax rate. However, after the fact, they're still less likely to get a bank loan for the bank. They're still less likely to get as much of a return on their dollar because the simple social inequality that is in place has not been addressed. More money has been thrown at the problem. Yes, more money has been given to these poor people. However, the social inequality in which they were exposed to, at which in many cases put them into that same dire situation, is not solved. So after this policy has its initial substantive effects of perhaps giving some people more money, even then they do not solve for the social inequality that still bears them down. But I'll take front half.
Sir, after generations of slavery, generations after the end of Jim Crow, poor blacks still face the same societal burdens as whites, in addition to other societal burdens. How do you ever make any sort of reparation for this increased burden placed on people of color relative to poor whites?
I believe the best way is to try and solve those kind of social burdens, to try and propose methods at which we can actually make people consider those people equal. I think opening opposition said that great at the beginning of this case when he said what we're trying to do is to consider people equal within society. I'm going to show you how does that not happen and then propose some alternatives that have been happening in the status quo to help us out. So 2 points of crystallization. First, how will, does institutionalized inequality change by actually changing the tax rate that we do to individuals? And secondly, how will the majority population react to an increased tax rate? So first I want to talk about whether institutionalized inequality actually changed. Opposition basically gave the point that we're giving these people more financial capital. With this capital, they have more cultural and political capital. That was something brought by opening opposition and substantive and mechanized by opening government and closing government. The link is where I have the problem. They talk about giving more financial capital, and then they automatically link it to more cultural capital, more political capital. They can all of a sudden now, win elections, change laws, change the entire way that society sees them because they have more money. I think that throwing money doesn't help. This is characterized beautifully by their example of Brazil, that their extension speaker magically points out for us. They point that they gave Brazilians, Dilma Rousseff gave many Brazilians an increased amount of money. We saw that even whenever more money was poured into the system, the inequality was still there present. We can see that even though money was the solution in Dilma Rousseff's case, we still saw inequality present within the system. Now, why is this the case? I think that money becomes the case in which inequality is still the system for two main reasons. Because, as my extension speaker brought, you can buy more things, and it communicates things about your worth in society, especially when we're talking about taxation, because how much people are worth is connected to how much taxes they can pay. Something that opening opposition brought up and didn't really substantiate. So first, we can think of it as just being the ability to buy more stuff. Okay, so why do we care about the ability to buy more stuff? We as people, don't in the United States really need more than the basic shelter, the basic food. We like to have these extra amenities because they make us feel better. They make us feel more as if a valuable person. More comfort leads to more of our ability to perceive ourselves as worthful, as valuable. This is why poor people, even though they have the same basic needs within the United States, met as the majority of rich people, feel inferior, feel as if they want to improve their position because they are not entitled to the exact same comforts. What are we doing? We're trying to solve this problem inherently by throwing more money, by saying you can now buy more stuff. Essentially, by changing the tax rate for the wide majority of blacks and whites, we're simply saying that we can fix this problem by giving them more things. We can compensate for the past flaws that we've had, the inequality that they've experienced, by giving them more stuff. This is fundamentally wrong. Yet what's another way to look at money? We can look at it as a perception of net wealth. Money, as I said, can communicate people's self-worth in society. Whenever we attach the tax rate to this, we attach essentially a racial worth to a net worth. We mean that the amount that you make in society and the amount that you pay in taxes is not simply a question of how much money you make, how comfortable you are, and how much you should be deserving of making other people less uncomfortable in society. It also attaches a racial worth to what people are. And this institutionalizes racism. And I'm going to transition to this when discussing my second question about how the majority population will react to an increased tax rate. Okay, so we have this idea of money as self-worth, right? We've already showed that institutionalizes that some individuals are perhaps worth more to the government than others, which we think is kind of problematic whenever people are considering what they mean to the government and how they can achieve political will. So, whenever we talk about whether it's the middle class, whether it's the poor people, money communicates to them how important they are. However, they now feel as if they're less important to the government. They now are less willing, the white people, for instance, or whoever was the majority in the case, now less willing to support policies that would be helping the other poor people. What are the impacts of this? Whenever you have this institutionalized inequality, you're throwing money at the problem, and you're removing the political mechanisms by which we can solve the problems in other, more meaningful ways. However, not only that, we emphasize a categorization of people by their net worth. I think this is beautifully emphasized, as my extension partner brought up, when we look at interracial people. You have many people, for instance myself, who may have been, yes, primarily white, however my great aunt was a Native American herself. Now, as a category of a tax bracket, am I now categorically worth perhaps 16% more than the average white person because of that in my blood? Do I now have to pay less of that money? We believe that these kind of ambiguities show that simply assigning a categorized tax rate does not solve for not only the complexities, but the intricacies of social inequality within the system. By doing this, we don't actually address the fact that these inequalities are in place. Instead, we assign categories for people, making them more easy to discriminate, and giving less political capital for us to actually solve these things in the future. We believe more alternatives that we can promote for would be great, like moving more public housing. But if we actually want to solve this institutional inequality, pushing for better schools. These are mechanisms by which we actually help people instead of throwing money at a problem that doesn't solve. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all. Thank you for your remarks, and thank you all for a wonderful debate. Please go outside, and we'll call you in as soon as we're done.